internet, we spend all our time here. I want to make it a paradise. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And now suddenly there is nothing to love. My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film Mother!
Is that the exclamation point?
That was the exclamation point. Those were ominous quotes we began with.
I know, and I'm glad that we have a special guest joining us today to help us decipher both the exclamation point and our quotes.
Yes.
Returning guest.
Purveyor of fine hats.
Matt Kroll is wearing a hat delivered by our guest today. CJ Johnson from ABC's Movieland podcast and Skippy TV's Watch This. Welcome back to the show, CJ.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me.
We're very excited to have you back.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, you have been, we have been always enjoying your feedback on the podcast recently. Particularly, I think of note, we kind of confirmed your opinion of the film It a little bit recently.
Right.
You were not a fan?
No, I'm so glad to hear you guys also had the same problems I did with It, which was essentially, it was like intro scene and then kid bumps into spooky image of clown, kid bumps into spooky image of clown, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then closing scene. There was no tension or build-up. It was just, it was the same scene repeated many times.
I particularly had a problem with that. I, it's one of those things, again, where I think on retrospect, I may have been a little harsh on the movie, but I still fundamentally think that for all the love it's getting, I don't think it's a very good movie. It has some fine scares, and I'm glad people are enjoying it at the movies and people are kind of engaging with the film that way. But I don't actually think it's a good movie.
I liked it fine for what it is. And I think, we talked about it, but actually, the young lady whom I saw it with, Jamie, made a very good point. She was listening to the podcast actually about it, and she had said,
Jamie.
She had said that basically we were talking about how the bullies were sort of perfunctory, right? Like they didn't really matter.
Yeah.
And she made a valid point about how actually the bullies are what's causing the actual fear in the kids and making the kids the most juicy targets for it. And I think that's an interesting take. I wonder if that was even Stephen King's actual the way he was trying to think about it. If that's the case, I just wish the film kind of like portrayed it a little more like that. But I thought it was an interesting take to make them a little more like meaningful.
I think it's a very generous reading of what those bullies do in the film. It's that thing where I think we were talked about on that episode, which was, I think there are interesting readings you could take out of this, but I don't think the film actually does a good job of portraying.
Right. I get that. I was looking for more reasons to I guess get rid of my issues, and that helped. There was a slight balm.
By the way, listeners, please go to CJ's podcast and have a listen, and also go to Watch TV. There was an episode that I was very impressed with recently, mainly because I speak a little bit of French, but an incredibly minor amount. But CJ actually did a full interview in French about a Jean-Paul Belmondo festival that was playing in Australia. I was incredibly impressed by the conversation there. I'm guessing CJ is a very fluent French speaker.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Yeah, très bien, très bien. But it was just incredible. It was just, and it was funny. I was watching it and going, I have this problem with the French language, which is that I can kind of understand when people are speaking and I can kind of make out what people are saying. But it was a great conversation, spoken entirely in French, which was entirely appropriate for that film festival. So please check that out. I'm a big fan, obviously.
Thank you.
If you are interested in hearing more of our opinions or writing us in and giving us your opinions on movies, you can do so at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod. We have got a listener piece of feedback on Mother, which maybe I'll save until we get into the actual review.
Interesting. Wait, is this a first? Is this an only podcast about movies first, where we're going to take a listener's write-in about a movie we technically haven't reviewed yet?
Well, the thing is, this listener is a very special listener and dear to our hearts. We both know her, Annie Gillies. And she was going to be on the show. She's been on the show on our Light Between Oceans episode. And I'm sure will appear in our Tomb Raider episode, as she is an enormous fan of Alicia Vikander. But she was going to appear to discuss Mother, but couldn't make it because of other commitments. So we're sad to miss out on you, Annie, tonight. But CJ, you have big shoes to fill
Good. I'm pleased. If I wasn't contributing to this episode by actually being on it, I would need to be doing what Annie's doing and writing in my own views anyway. Because of all the films this year, this is the one that most obviously demands discourse. The movie demands to be talked about.
Let's talk about that in a second. Matt, tell us what Mother is about.
Oh, are you ready for the IMDb wonderment?
Hit me.
Okay.
Right in the face.
And then read the IMDb. A couple's relationship is tested when uninvited guests arrive at their home, disrupting their tranquil existence.
Accurate. To the point.
That is entirely accurate. That is
entirely accurate. And I actually think
nothing is false.
I actually think that is a good synopsis of this film.
Well, it's a good synopsis to not spoil anything.
Yeah, not spoil anything. It doesn't quite give away the tone and where the film goes. But this is a film that has had much divisive opinion this year, to the point where I'm going to read the Observer review, just the last couple of lines of the Observer review from Rex Reed, who can be a little bit of a contrarian, I must admit, but you
wouldn't know anything about that.
His review.
Isn't Rex Reed about 96? Oh my God.
He's been around for a while, yeah. Nothing about Mother makes one lick of sense as Darren Aronofsky's corny vision of madness turns more hilarious than scary. With so much crap around to clog the drain, I hesitate to label it the worst movie of the year when the worst movie of the century fits even better.
And also, why are these kids using cell phones all the time? It seems like they just used the corded phone on the wall.
To be fair, he's 96. He might have seen, he's seen a century of movies. So.
And why do these movies have sound? You don't just need the pictures.
That's true. That is the lunatic writings of an old man who doesn't get it. That's just bullshit.
It's also one of the few movies, and incidentally, I was reading up on Cinema Score. Cinema Score has been around since 1980 and is basically an aggregate of exit scores from premiere screenings of movies. And in the time that Cinema Score has been around, since 1980, basically 16 movies have been given an F score at Cinema Score.
Wow.
And Mother is now one of those.
Mother!
I can even point to, I'm just loving this because this is all across my feed. People who are normally very eloquent about their feelings about movies, other filmmakers that I know are suddenly filling up with my feed with how awful this film is and how much they and they do it with such vitriol. Like they're accusing Darren Aronofsky of being a big budget film school filmmaker, of being completely inept, and the famous story of Darren Aronofsky, which if you haven't read the press note, says that he wrote this film in 5 days, being an example of that he should have just taken more time to do it. The New York Times has published an entire article about mothers, people responding to Mother, and then listener comments are things like, the dumbest movie ever. This movie gave me a stomach ache. I love these two actors, but this was just horrible. So this movie is about a middle-aged guy married to a woman 20 years his junior. Unspeakable violence done to a woman. Sounds original. Seriously, I think the most shocking thing about this is the idea that a couple can survive and own a home based on a poet's salary. And so on and so on.
That is a good burn. That is a good burn.
And so on and so on.
You've got to get better friends because...
this is the New York Times. That's from the New York Times.
I know, but what you said earlier about people all over your feeds... sort of saying how much they thought the film was awful. I was in an appointment the other day, and when I stepped out, I turned on my phone and I looked at my Facebook feed, and 3 of my friends from all over the world had just seen Mother at various cinemas around the place, and they all were posting about how much they absolutely loved it. So,
oh wow, I gotta say, I have yet to see, and I think the reason this might be the case is the people that I think love this film aren't the kind of people that jump on Facebook to shout about any movie or every movie. The people who hate this movie are the kinds of people who get on Facebook whenever anything pisses them off.
I gave up on people a long time ago. So I just haven't been, I'm talking to you two.
Let's do a little pre-roll back here.
Oh.
How are we on, I feel like I often take the point of view of looking at the director's body of work and looking at film as a director's medium.
It's all about the body with you, Shahir. Why not the mind, huh? Why not?
I'm all into the body horror. That's what it is. And so in this case, in many cases that may not be justified because we were talking about filmmakers who are making their first or second film. The body of work doesn't necessarily matter. You know, who is the auteur? Is it the screenwriter? Is it the director? Is it the actor?
We know who the auteur is here.
But in this case, in the case of Darren Aronofsky, I think it's very difficult not to say that any film of his is a direct reflection of who he is as a person.
Absolutely.
And he is a filmmaker I am very, very interested in, having seen, and interestingly, I saw Pi when I was at university in New Zealand, and I was taking calculus, and my entire calculus class decided to go to the film festival and see a film based on Pi and based on mathematics.
Oh, how cool!
Yeah, and it was really cool because there was all these people that were interested in. There was all this talk in Pi about Fibonacci's theorem, so it was things that we were learning about at the same time. But for me, it had to actually be the point at which where I kind of decided, I'm less interested in hard sciences and I'm more interested in in the arts, in the way that film was made. Requiem for a Dream is a film I absolutely adore, but I've only seen once because I saw it when I had a fever, and I listened to the soundtrack on repeat for the next few days, and it has always kind of left quite an impression. I think it's a masterful film, but I've never seen it again. Maybe it doesn't hold up. I'm not entirely sure.
No, it does. It's incredible, and I showed Requiem for a Dream to my students earlier this year, and they're 20-something film students, very switched on, very intelligent kids, and it totally freaked them out. It absolutely bugged them out. So it's still got all of its amazing, strange, scary power.
I'm going to be the contrarian here for a second. I've only seen it once as well, and to be honest, I don't remember disliking it, but I couldn't tell you, I couldn't describe a lick of it to you. I saw it again when I was in college. It did not grab me at all, but it's grabbed nearly, I know, nearly every one of my friends. It's on their top 10s, and it's funny, I've meant to go back, and I will, but it just never, it didn't have that power the first time, and I keep trying to think back, was I doing something else? Did I,
on heroin?
Was I literally doing heroin?
It's basically train spotting, but nowhere near as fun.
Right. Yeah. So I do need to see it again. But it's funny.
It's also got the most intense last 20 minutes of any film ever made.
Accompanied by one of the most intense and well-used scores by Clint Mansell and the Kronos Quartet.
It's funny because I don't doubt any of this. I don't know why it didn't hit, so I have to do it again. There was a glitch in the Matrix that day.
I have a sneaking suspicion the film won't hold up as much for me personally because I feel...
Because now you're not on heroin.
I'm not on heroin for one. Was it heroin or speed that they were doing in Requiem? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
Requiem is heroin.
It is heroin. Okay.
It's heroin. At one point, they all take an ecstasy just to have a break.
just to
have a nice change of pace.
I have a sneaking suspicion that the comments on my Facebook feed that accuse Darren Aronofsky, particularly in the case of Mother, of being a film school filmmaker, might hold true to Requiem for a Dream, because I feel like that film is so... didactic in structure and in tone that it might come across maybe now to me. I'm not sure.
Well, CJ just said it wouldn't.
Well, to his students.
I really don't think so. It was bold and revolutionary and striking in its day. And now when you look at it, you just see how many people it's influenced and how bigger, as I say, an influence it has been on other filmmakers. And it is still terrifying, and it is still amazing and operatic and huge in its use of image and music and despair. You can see the direct line from it to Mother.
Right. Yeah, I guess I'm just worried about all the sort of the obvious I am a director kind of moments, the split screen, the Irish focuses, the way the music's used. But
that's what he is.
Yeah. And the reason I'm sort of worried, kind of not worried, but just kind of like, maybe I won't respond to that, was because of what happened after Requiem for a Dream. So the famous story is that The Fountain was going to be his next film. It was this sort of magnum opus science fiction relationship story that at one point was going to star Brad Pitt, who had grown out this long beard. It was going to be filmed in Sydney, Australia, and all of a sudden the film got cancelled because I believe, and CJ, you might correct me if I'm wrong here, Brad Pitt was divorcing Jennifer Aniston at the time and decided to take a hiatus from through movies. And this $90 million production that had built sets that was basically waiting for its star to arrive had to be entirely dismantled. And
That's right. That was so weird.
yeah, it was a strange time. And Mr. Aronofsky himself had to rewrite a $90 million film down to $30 million and recast it with his then girlfriend at the time, Rachel Weisz, and Australian superstar Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
And then he married Rachel Weisz,
Yep.
and he's subsequently divorced her, and he has a 10-year-old son with her,
Yep.
which is all kind of important knowledge to know when you see Mother.
Also that he is now dating
Jennifer
Jennifer Lawrence, which is the strangest thing of all in the entire Aronofsky story, because when you see Mother, one of the multiple readings of Mother is do not, whatever you do, date Darren Aronofsky.
Yeah, it plays out like a cautionary tale, not even like an instruction manual to never date that man, and yet, okay.
I mean, and I try not to get too hung up on the personal lives of the filmmakers I love, because I just think it's sort of it gets in the way of enjoying the work for the work's sake.
Well, I mean, then it gets into that whole like Michael Jackson artists you love whatever argument.
Well,
too.
but the irony is like when I found out that Rachel Weisz had left Darren Aronofsky, and I was telling my wife, and I just had this sort of like, how dare she kind of approach to, because I, in my mind, Darren Aronofsky is a master filmmaker who I love, and I was like, I'm sure you can do no better than that man. Now I might think twice about that.
Yeah, I think you might have been skewed initially.
I will say,
I adore him as a filmmaker, and I suspect that as a person, he is a self-loving prick, I suspect.
I will say The Fountain is a film that doesn't quite work for me. I think it's a film, it demonstrated his ambition as a filmmaker in terms of science fiction, what he was trying to do in terms of practical effects, in terms of telling a metaphysical story through cinema, which is something that a lot of people don't aim for.
I did not see The Fountain.
It's well worth your time. I personally found that it had one singular idea about life and death, and it just plays that the entire way through, and I found it not to be particularly resonant, though I admired it, certainly. CJ, how did you feel about The Fountain?
I didn't see The Fountain. That's the one I haven't seen. I started it once, and I stopped it, and then I just didn't feel compelled to go back, so I feel guilty that I haven't seen it,
not
but
at
in
all.
a way, I will see it at some point.
There's no guilt here.
Yeah. I think what was the film I recommended to you guys last time was Time Crimes. I feel much stronger about you guys seeing Time Crimes.
I watched Time Crimes on your recommendation. I enjoyed it.
Did you enjoy it? Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad. I felt like I might have lost my touch.
No, it was fun. It was creepy fun. I liked it.
Then something remarkable happened, which is that Aronofsky entirely changed track into a film that would kind of transform who and what we understood about Darren Aronofsky. He made the Oscar-nominated feature film, The Wrestler, which did Mickey Rourke win the Oscar for it? I believe it. I don't think he did.
No, he was nominated.
He was nominated.
He lost to Sean Penn for playing Harvey Milk.
Harvey Milk.
Didn't he?
There you go.
I thought The Wrestler was incredible, and I thought Mickey Rourke was incredible in that movie.
Wrestler is my favorite of his films up to this point.
Okay, that's
that's a tough one for me.
I know. Well, it's just because, like, I don't know. It that movie struck every correct chord for me, and it did it incredibly artfully. On a topic that normally doesn't get artful, portrayal. It just, there's plenty of good wrestling documentaries and things like that about the actual lifestyle, but it never was sort of portrayed. It's so strange, like if not reality, then the feeling of what that reality must be like, and he just nailed that entirely with that film.
Absolutely. It is for what it is, for what it wants to be. I think it's kind of a perfect film.
Yeah,
it's just astonishingly exact and precise. The performances, the script, the fact that he shot on 16 millimeter. I mean, it does feel like a documentary in those bits where, he's buying the steroids in the locker room, or he's being told how to use the razor blade in the locker room. And it is just so real. I can't believe how good that film is actually. And I can't believe how Mickey Rourke managed to make himself look like that for that film.
Yeah. Didn't he just kind of look like that anyway? Isn't Mickey Rourke?
Well, he wasn't that built.
Oh, okay. I was referring to like the overuse of plastic surgery.
Oh,
in
sure.
His personal life.
Yeah. No, I mean his body. No, his face is all screwed up from being pounded in the ring. Remember, from boxing.
And I think, well, to me, the thing about The Wrestler was that it showed a deeper humanity to Aronofsky as a filmmaker. I think, there was a potential to think that as a filmmaker, Aronofsky is kind of a structuralist. He is someone who uses structure and nonlinear narrative and very precise camera tricks to tell stories. But The Wrestler was rugged, rough around the edges. It had that documentary feel to it. It felt very, very warm and inviting, and it felt very human. And I thought this was a different side to we're seeing to Aronofsky.
Yeah, and there's no camera tricks or operatic crescendos or any of that. And so as thus, it's actually his outlier.
Right.
Even though it's the film that feels most like other people's films, for him, it's his film that feels least like the rest of his films.
That's very well put. I think that's absolutely right. So maybe that if you haven't watched a lot of Aronofsky's films, and if for some reason you walked in and saw Mother for the first time, and that was the
first, if you've just seen The Wrestler and this,
I would say go back and check out The Wrestler, and then go through everything else as well. He followed, of course, with Black Swan, which was Natalie Portman's Oscar winner.
Yep.
A film that I adored. I think it sort of fused what we saw of Aronofsky's earlier work, like Requiem for a Dream and The Fountain and Pi, into what he'd kind of come to with The Wrestler, which was this sort of organic human story, but still fused with a kind of body horror that was evident in Requiem for a Dream and Pi in particular, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And Black Swan was also nominated for Best Picture.
Right.
And when you look at, I think Black Swan is a masterpiece. I think it's incredible. To decide between that and Requiem for a Dream of his films for my favorite would be very difficult. But Black Swan, if you look at Black Swan and The Wrestler, essentially they're the same story. And the ending of both is the same.
The same ending.
But one is the Darren Aronofsky operatic metaphysical version, and one is the human documentary version.
Something much warmer and something friendlier versus something very dark. And it's ironic. I don't know why this strikes me as ironic, but the Wrestler story feels very warm and human, whereas the ballerina story feels very dark and sinister.
And cold,
cold. Then he, and this is all going to, I want to go through this because this is all leading to Mother. We've only got one more to go, and that's Noah. So Noah was his kind of first religious epic, and I'm saying the first because this might be because the Mother might be his second.
Definitely.
Noah.
I would argue that Mother is his first one.
Well, have you seen Noah?
No.
Okay, so Noah's obviously the telling of Noah's Ark, a film that I kind of felt was an odd one in Aronofsky's oeuvre, in that it was.
God bless you.
Thank you. It was essentially a retelling of the Noah's Ark story in a sort of Lord of the Rings-esque style, sort of a big fantasy opera. It was, to be fair, it was a film that I didn't have much interest in seeing other than for Aronofsky, and it was a film that I thought was much better than I thought it was going to be.
Now, is that because, and happens to me all the damn time, is it because you had so little expectations going in that when it met minimal bars, you're like, okay.
No, I think my biggest concern with that is I'm not interested in religious stories told on the big screen, because I've especially told what I was hoping for in that film was some degree of interrogation of religious doctrine, and what I don't. And from what I saw in the trailers, that film wasn't going to do that. It was going to tell literally the story of Noah building an ark that, all animals were going to be saved upon.
But turn him into like a Herculean sort of hero type.
A little bit sort of Gladiator, because it's Russell Crowe, a little bit Lord of the Rings. It has got one miraculous sequence in the middle of it, which is basically a stop motion time lapse of the entire retelling of the universe from a religious point of view, but it somehow manages to fuse sort of a spiritual belief with evolution, which I thought was it was very striking when I saw it, quite impressive. And
it's also got a pretty good flood.
Yeah, he's got a pretty great flood going in there. Although I would expect nothing less from an Oscar-nominated director at that level, with that particular kind of film. It was clearly kind of going for an award season kind of vibe.
I don't think so, really.
I don't think so either. They were touting that as an action movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think so either. Like, to me, Noah was like, I'm a man of science, and so when I find the Old Testament ridiculous, and what I sort of think Noah was not pretending that it's not ridiculous. Like, one of the things about when you read the Old Testament, it's full of, and Rachel was 937 years old when she gave birth to Becca.
Yeah, right.
And Becca was 768 when she married Abraham, who was 982. And Noah has all that. Like, Noah acknowledges all this ridiculous. There are rock monsters walking around.
Right,
it's like, let's do it literally to see how ludicrous it is.
To show you exactly how much, like, in the same vein it is to say a Lord of the Rings.
Right.
Like, it's just a different source material.
And I think that's maybe why I responded to it a little more positively than I expected to. I kind of found it to be just a fairly good yarn, not one to take too seriously, but a fairly good yarn. And I enjoyed seeing Aronofsky kind of being given a bigger budget to kind of see the vision he might have expressed in a film like The Fountain, with that kind of scale.
The thing I couldn't tell after Noah, and I haven't seen The Fountain, as I say, and so it really would have kind of made a difference if I'd known the answer to this question going into Mother, was I couldn't tell, having seen Noah, whether Aronofsky, I mean, obviously he's Jewish, we've all seen Pi, but whether he is someone who's a believer or not, or, what his attitude was toward the Bible and toward religion.
I think I know now.
I still don't know.
Oh, well, we'll get to it. We'll get to what I think of it anyway. When we get to
I have an answer, but I think it's best we
save it.
We talk about this in our review of Mother. So this leads us, of course, to Darren Aronofsky's Mother.
Not his actual, the film.
The film, Mother exclamation point.
Yeah.
His actual Mother has a capital M.
Right, of course. The lowercase has many differances.
Exclamation point.
Yeah.
So this was a movie that, again, was released to much fanfare at the Toronto Film Festival, and then oddly given a wide release that has perhaps backfired on Paramount to the point where they've had to issue a statement defending their decision to release this film, where they've kind of said, well, listen, we know that some people are just not going to like this movie, but it's a filmmaker at the top of his game. And this was the interesting thing about their statement that I found really weird and oddly defensive from a studio. They said something along the lines of, nobody complains when Netflix tells an original, bold story. This is our version of that. As though
well, they're trying to use buzzwords to save face in an interesting way. You know what? Good on them. Good on them.
Yes, good on them.
Yeah, because that's great. And that's, I know you could look at it from two different angles. One of which is it's a backstepping PR move. So like they're the people, aren't just quiet while people trash their movie. But the other way is looking at it as being like, yeah, like, well, this is the honest truth. Like, they know what's in this movie. They know it's not going to sit well with some people, and that's just that. And they still did it anyway. So good on them.
Yep. They said, we give this guy final cut, and we defy you to contradict us about this movie.
I mean, how would you change this movie if you took it away from him? Like, what would you do to like try and make this movie more palatable?
You'd only shelve it. There's only one change that a studio would make, and that would be to shelve it, not release it.
I'm going to give you my quick review just because I want you guys to have the lion's share of time here to talk about it, because I feel like I've done a lot of
talking. Is your first thoughts, is what you're saying?
Yeah, my first thoughts here, just quickly, I absolutely love this film. Much to the seeing of reviews that people are absolutely vitriolic against this film. I fear that I may be being contrarian in this case, but I absolutely love this film. I loved everything that this film was and stands for, not only in terms of its messaging, which I agree contains multitudes. You could read this film in many ways, and I'm less interested in very specific readings of this film. I am just glad there are multitudes of readings and people are reading it in multiple ways. And I am just happy that a film this big, this bold, this adventurous with narrative and movie stars and discussions about celebrity and religion and the artistic creation process is out in mainstream theaters. And I am really happy that people are seeing it and getting angry about it and wanting to talk about it. So that is my, just my initial reviews. Matt, do you want to go next?
Okay. Basically, I had only seen the trailer. I didn't really do any research on it. I didn't know, what anything really to expect. And then I saw it, and I knew when I left the theater that I really liked it. But I wasn't sure why. And I knew that there was going to be multiple readings of it, of what it all meant, and blah, 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 blah. I had two rando theories, both of which fell apart by the end of me watching it. Mm-hmm. And I decided, normally if I get out a movie that I enjoyed, but I was a little bit confused by, I'll go home right away and research. And I was like, no, I'm going to sleep on this. And I'm going to research it in the morning. And that's what I did. And that's when I sort of, matched sort of theories to my own theories, etc. And when I was doing that, obviously I saw the negative reception, and I was like, yeah, I figured some people would be like that, but I didn't expect the breadth of it to be like that. But this is a fucking movie, man. Like, this is good shit. And
that should be your tagline on the poster.
It's good shit. Just not to, just praise it too much, but we'll talk about I feel like we're going to talk about a lot of the themes and things like that, but everything in this, down to the acting, the cinematography, the sound work was amazing. The VFX, this is something that I was sort of interested in, because it does, obviously go off the rails in the third act a bit. But even though there were I would argue more fantastical things going on in certain parts of this movie than, say, the film It, it felt far more real and visceral to me in the effects work and the way they chose to sort of go about doing things. Now, granted, one is a demon clown and another one is, well, it's a bunch of things. But I really, just coming from a place of seeing two very violent moments, or multiple violent moments in the last two films we reviewed, there was something far more powerful about Mother than there was It. That's me. CJ, what about you, pal?
I loved it too, for all the reasons that you guys are just stating. Shahir, basically what you just said, everything that you just said could have come out of my mouth about this film. I loved it as an experience. I loved it as a piece of auteurist cinema, and I loved everything that you were saying about it, that it exists and that it's a mainstream film and that it's got Jennifer Lawrence in it and that it's provoking debate and all of this stuff. So everything there is there, and I love the themes, and I love what it's about, which I guess we'll get into, because I think it's the angriest film I've seen in a long, long time. And I think it's amazing that someone has been given such a large canvas to be so angry on. And I mean, we all know we're all feeling pretty angry at the world at the moment.
Yeah.
And he's an artist who's been able to express it in this very unique way, which is basically a final cut piece of auteurist out there cinema, as you say, released on 3,000, 4,000 screens, and that's just in the United States. Let me tell you this. My only quibble with the film is an aesthetic one, which is the film is shot with the exception of, I think, 3 shots of the house, or maybe, the stuff at the beginning and the fire at the beginning and at the end. The film is all shot either over Jennifer Lawrence's shoulder, behind her head, or in front of her face. And Aronofsky has said that if you actually do the timing, 66% of the film is on her face, is a close-up of her face. And that decision to film the whole film with her head or her face in frame is my only real problem with the film, because it actually started to annoy me. It made me feel so claustrophobic. I feel it almost gave me a vague headache while I was watching it. I kind of wanted to just jam her head out of the way. And obviously it's a choice. I mean, it wasn't accidental. The cinematographer and Darren Aronofsky decided this is how we're going to do it. But I think you could have achieved the same level of subjectivity without necessarily having so much head and face. So that purely aesthetic choice riled me, but thematically, I adore the damn thing.
I was reading your. I cheated a little bit, CJ. I was reading your review today, and that I actually wrote. I wrote that down that had bothered you. I actually really liked it.
Did you?
And I think what got me from what you just said now and in your review, how it was starting to give you a bit of a headache. And I was actually wondering, what's your this is a weird little tangent, but follow me down this rabbit hole. What is your history playing video games, in particular third person games?
Like shooters?
No, not like a first person shooter. Like when you actually like see your character, but you're kind of close. You look kind of almost similarly to the way this was shot, over the shoulder, back of the head.
Oh, no, I don't play them.
Okay, there's games like Gears of War and things like that that utilize sort of basically a similar style of like making sure your main character is always in the scene, but you're not seeing through their eyes. I play a lot of them, and I think that because I could see why this whole thing could bother somebody and actually start giving them a headache. I feel like I'm so used to the perspective that I just instantly just latched onto it. I was like, oh, okay, we're in her world now. This is what we're going to be looking at. Like,
yeah. Hardcore Henry did it too last year.
Well, Hardcore Henry did it first person
in Hardcore Henry. Yeah, this is a sort of the third person, or however you want to put it.
Here's what I'll say is that first off, I think the to pony off that conversation, I think the look of the film is extraordinary. Matthew Libatique, who's shot a bunch of Aronofsky's films, returns again. They shot it in 16 millimeter, which
is crazy.
Which I think lends a sort of
good.
Unusual aesthetic, particularly for today. I mean, a filmmaker friend of mine, we always talk about when you shoot on film, the film actually has sort of a breathable life quality to it.
It reminded me, for whatever reason, especially near the end of Sleep No More, the actual play in New York. There's so much aesthetics to it that just made that it sort of felt. I think it had to do with the 16 mil, like just very touchable. Like everything felt like, I don't know, textured down to the way it was shot.
And also because the film is so dark, that brings out the grain, so you can feel the grain of the 16 millimeter film.
I loved the choice of framing the film from Jennifer Lawrence's character, the mother character in this film. The thing I think, that's tricky about what you're saying, CJ, in terms of like whether it riles you or not, is that the problem is that this film is such a singular vision that even if it riles you, you can't deny it as a choice that was made and a very deliberate choice. And so even if it kind of riles you and it doesn't work for you, it's not a case where you think, where I think it could work better done another way, because this is such a product of a singular driven vision that it's, it's kind of like saying, I wish Rosemary's Baby was in black and white. You know what I mean? It's sort of
no, I couldn't agree with you more. You're right. Like, I don't know how else you would have done it, because it's integral to the fabric of the film.
It's integral to the fabric of the way Aronofsky makes this film. Like, you probably could, as you say, do it in other ways, but then it wouldn't be an Aronofsky film, and that's what makes it so powerful.
So I'm not saying I wish it had been done another way. I have to say that it did kind of get in my way.
Yeah, and that absolutely can. I mean, that 100% can happen, especially with something as blatant and as in your face as this.
I will kind of go on this point here. I do have quibbles with the film. I do too. I think there are things that I think are problematic in terms of the way you read it. But so when people are angry about this film, I don't think that is a bad response. I don't think that being provoked by this film and basically shoving it away is actually a bad response to this film. As long as you have a response, I think that's important.
And as long as you admit that it's made well.
Yeah, I think it's hard to deny that it's made well. But
I know a lot of people kind of get up in their own grill and just be like, "This is garbage," and you're like, "Okay."
I will read Annie's thoughts, and the reason I did want to have a counterpoint to our conversation.
Did you figure all three of us would be like, "This movie's so good"?
Yeah, I know, and I was just, I always worry about that. I like it when we have something to chew over, but I think we all know why we love this film, which is why this conversation is going to work. But Annie's thoughts were, she thought that the first half of the film was boring. Now, I apologize. I'm going to sort of kind of
boring.
Bear with me.
She can't defend herself, so this is going to be rough. rough. Sorry, Annie.
Sorry, apologies, Annie.
Yeah, sorry, Annie, but oh my God, to call any minute of this film boring, that's one element I can't imagine.
And I'm reading from a text message she sent me, so I'm not. So I'm gonna try and paraphrase this, because chicks text messages thing. This is one thing I will I think whenever you're receiving notes about anything, reading the underlying note behind the note is important. And she suggested that waiting for something to happen, and J-Law's monotone talking was really off-putting for her. Was there a backstory of some kind of why where Jennifer's character would stay in the situation as the craziness was happening? Now, I
think there is one eventually, but yeah,
there is. But I don't disagree with her. I do not feel the same way, obviously.
But it sounds like she read the film literally.
Yeah, isn't that disagreeing with her though, Shahir?
No, and here's the thing. I think your level of enjoyment of this film should be put under a 3-layered test.
Oh, Jesus. All right, I'll pull out my textbook.
That everyone should have to take after they leave the cinema.
Yeah.
A 3-layered test. Jimmy Kimmel has his healthcare test. I'm going to have the Shahir Will You Enjoy Mother test.
This would be expensive if the fact that the movie is probably going to leave the world cinemas next week because it's kind of bombed.
Yeah, it only opened to $8 million, I think. Has done pretty terribly. But I do think the conversation around the movie might gear it into a better place, either when it goes on VOD or maybe even right now, because I know the updated marketing is embracing this kind of
as it should. Also, I'm going to be buying this on Blu-ray, so everyone can come over my house and watch it whenever they want.
But
let's take the 3-tier test.
The 3-tier test. The first tier of this test is: are you willing to watch movies as metaphor as opposed to literal? If you're not willing to watch, and there are a lot of movies that basically opt not to work literally, but work purely as metaphor. Obviously films like Eraserhead by David Lynch, Videodrome by David Cronenberg, Naked Lunch, another Cronenberg film. There are Andrew Zulawski's Possession. There are films that operate purely as metaphor, and their narratives are not intended to be taken literally. I think if you don't make it past that first mark with this movie, which I think is what happened with Annie, if you're not willing to accept the events that are happening as metaphor and purely as metaphor, then the film's probably not going to work right away.
I'm going to disagree with your first test.
Okay.
Because yes, I mean, this is going to be a little bit semantical, but try to follow me down this. There's a lot of metaphor in this film, of course, but one of the reasons this movie works is, even though it's kind of a little bit all over the place and it does dip into that magical realism sort of, a lot.
Yeah.
The world it sets up is blatant, in your face. I mean, right up, and the beginning half that she had said is boring. I didn't find boring because of all the little hints that led me to be okay with how the movie then unfurls. The world this film sets up, in very subtle but skilled ways, makes it okay for me to I'm not even talking in a metaphorical sense. I'm talking about from beginning to end, the world this movie portrays, even if it was supposed to not be a metaphor and it was straight up like, this is how this world is, still made sense in its own rules. Like it really actually did. Now, even though it starts pretty humdrum and normal with, a couple contingencies of weirdness, if you're not like watching very carefully as it moves forward and then it goes to batshit insane, I can see how that would be unnerving. But I also think you could actually, I hesitate to say enjoy, but experience and appreciate this film on a purely literal, what you're seeing is what you're getting level, because it sets itself up where, even though I don't think that's the way it should be experienced, you could experience it like that.
Do you think the third act works as a literal reading?
Based on the way it builds to that act, then yes. And only because, and I'll talk about the ending later, but only because of the ending and the tie back to the beginning.
CJ?
I suppose you could, at least on the level of horror film, because you have to account, Matt, for at least, the gaping, bleeding, burning hole in the floor. There are certain elements that are obviously fantastical.
Sure, and that's what helps you buy in.
A literal poet with literal fans coming over and literally staging a wild party in their house, there are still those elements that are I don't know, vaguely supernatural-esque.
Right, and
but as long as you accepted those, then yes, you could
that's what
sort
I'm
of
saying.
take it as literary, yeah.
Because those small moments exist is why it can be. Now, again, I don't want to preface. Don't do that. Don't experience the film like that.
You wouldn't. Yeah, it would be pointless.
I mean, I think also, and we're obviously are spoiling the movies at this point.
Oh yeah, we're in spoilers now.
By the third act, when chaos reigns, to borrow from another metaphorical filmmaker, Lars von Trier.
Wow.
When chaos reigns towards the end of this film, I think it's impossible to read this as literal events rather as metaphorical. But I also found that for me, the point at which I started understanding the film as metaphor occurred around the point at which Michelle Pfeiffer appeared, because Michelle Pfeiffer didn't seem to be a real person as much as he seemed to be a projection of Jennifer Lawrence's own anxieties. She seemed to be playing on those anxieties immediately. You know, she played on the having children thing, the having a family. She seemed to be acting in a way that didn't seem realistic or literal to me. It felt much more metaphorical, and that for me personally, I would pass the first level when I started to understand, oh, this film is actually playing beyond my understanding of natural horror and beyond my understanding, or even supernatural horror, and beyond a literal reading. So that's.
Yeah, I gotta.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, I was going to say, like, I avoid all trailers now, and so I saw no trailers for this, and I was.
That's a good trailer.
I'm sure. And so I was at a critic screening that started at 4 hours before the screening in Toronto. And so we were only on like this 6-hour embargo. So we were basically embargoed until the screening in Toronto had ended. And so I knew nothing except the poster. And that it was Darren Aronofsky and with Jennifer Lawrence. I didn't even know that Javier Bardem was in it. And so I was following it like you follow a film, literally at first, even though, you know, the first scene, the opening, the prologue tells you there's horror or supernatural or whatever. And so I did have this, I did have to wait for a certain thing to click in, like you're describing, Shahir, to realize that it was metaphor. And that was frustrating. And it's almost as though if I knew going in to only watch it as metaphor or parable or simile or analogy, then I might have not been through the frustration of waiting for anything to make sense. And perhaps, you know, when you say all these people who are sort of hating on the film, are hating on it, perhaps if they'd gone in knowing that they were seeing a metaphorical film, they might have enjoyed it a lot more, because if you are trying to make sense of it, it just keeps getting away from you.
Possibly, but half the fun of this movie is figuring that out. Like
it is indeed, but I think the backlash that we're seeing is as much as I think this is it doesn't bother me that the marketing marketed as a horror movie, because I think that's what you would do in this case. I think
it's so great that it did.
I think people are responding to the fact that they thought they were getting a horror film, but when oddities such as the blood on the floor, the bleeding heart house, sort of start to become more manifest in the film.
Kristen Wiig
popping up.
Just popping up out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think
that's when it lost me.
I think that's the point at which where people, and this is again my first, you know, like I was trying to break down how to view this film and whether this film is right for you. If a movie operating at the level of metaphor, which this is doing, isn't your cup of tea, then I think you're going to have a bad time.
I'm sorry. What are your other rules? What are the other two?
Yeah, so what's your second tier?
My second tier is whether the metaphor resonates with you. So the other issue here is that people are responding to the obviousness and the unsubtleness with which this is in some parts, a retelling of the biblical story.
Yeah.
And you know, with Javier Bardem cast as God, and with Jennifer Lawrence cast as Mother Nature,
and the Gleason brothers as Cain and Abel.
Absolutely. And the problem is if you are a person who either knows and understands that story. I don't think the story necessarily deviates too far from that. So if that story is not of interest, if the messages of that particular story are sort of trite to you, then I think then even if you are able to watch it on a level of metaphor, you might not enjoy the film.
Well, it deviates from that. The main character is a deviation kind of that but it's still saying the same thing. He just took it in a far more interesting level than I think that biblical story, the Old Testament and then the New Testament sort of do. Yeah, and I think there's so many tiny, ridiculous little and by ridiculous I mean good, just callbacks basically to all of these biblical I mean, hell, even when Adam, the first house guest, played by Ed Harris.
Wonderful Ed Harris.
Yeah. Even when he comes back after they go on a hike, like you see that there's a gash on his side where, maybe a rib was taken out. Then all of a sudden the next morning, Eve shows up, Michelle Pfeiffer, and you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
Hell, even down to this.
Yeah, it's all there.
Yeah. There's a couple things. The one thing I was a little bit confused about, and I want to ask you guys real quick, just while we're on the topic of small things before we go to tier 3. The yellow powder that she uses both in her drink and to paint the walls. What did you guys think that was?
I have no idea.
I mean, I would. This is kind of leading into. Well, I guess it's part of my second tier, which is that it's whether the metaphor works and whether the metaphor holds for you. And to me, I mean, I could find some reading in that in relation to Mother Nature and the sun, and something along those lines. I don't know if it's necessarily true. I think the thing that I do enjoy about this movie, in terms of that. About whether the metaphor resonates is something I said at the beginning, which is I think that the metaphor has multitudes of layers in this, and it can be read in many, many ways. Mm-hmm. You can read this as a biblical story through the lens of the modern social media age that we live through. You can read it as a biblical story through the lens of the parallel between the creation of earth alongside the creation of art. You can read it you could even read it as we said earlier, as a cautionary tale about what it's like to date Darren Aronofsky.
Never love an artist.
Never love an artist at all. And so I think for me, the reason why I enjoy the metaphor level actually works, and if some people who are maybe religious or interested in biblical tales might find the retelling of the Adam and Eve God story sort of a little bit trite, but I found that there were really interesting things done with it, most of which, the thing that really, really absolutely resonated and stayed with me and made me think about it for days on end after seeing this movie, was this notion that God is a narcissist.
Yes. Well, hold on. First of all, yes.
That's interesting.
We're going to go right back to that in a second. It is sunshine, by the way. That's what the yellow stuff is. If you think about it, she's always, whenever she's nervous or something horrible is going on, she has to retreat back to regaining energy from the sun.
Here's the thing. I think it can be sunshine.
Sure, it can be sunshine.
It could be anything.
Or it could be Powerade mix. It doesn't matter. Yeah. But that's how I read it. Yeah. So this concept of God as a narcissist is my fucking jam. I love this concept. I've loved it in every piece of media that's ever done it. I've written stories about it. I've run Rift's tabletop RPG campaigns based around it. If you out there, dear listeners, have not read A Tale, the graphic novel from the early 90s called Preacher, which is now a series, I believe, on AMC that just wrapped its second season. The series is touch and go, but I do really love it. The second season's really holding up. I just started. It deals with the idea that God not only is a narcissist, but they go a little bit farther into him basically abandoning the earth and just going and like doing his own thing. But how, this is the thing I want to talk about. If a God exists, how could he or it, let's just say it, how could, not the clown, how could it not be a narcissist?
Well,
how?
CJ, I don't know. Do you want to jump in on this?
I love that is one of the most resonant elements of the grand, especially biblical metaphor that you guys are responding to, because that's a really interesting one to me. That wasn't the element of the metaphor that I loved the most, but it's now that you guys are getting excited about it, it's exciting me too. And that just goes to show, as you say, how many layers of meaning and metaphor are crammed into this film. And it does bear the weight. When you say that you can, we can all agree, and it's pretty obvious in the credits with the capitalizations, et cetera, of him, et cetera,
yep,
that we do have the biblical metaphor. You can then look at it through, as you say, the social media lens. You can look at it through the Trump lens. You can look at it through the artist as narcissist lens. And you can, whichever one reverberates most to you, you can follow that path. And I'm sure the second time I see it, I can enjoy it in a different way, you know, and maybe, but yes, absolutely. The God as narcissist thing, now that you mention it, it's incredibly strongly there.
And another thing, just off the back of that, CJ, there was an article on Polygon by reviewer Ben Conchera, or he was at least doing a think piece on it. He put it best. This is the best term in just a short sentence about this. This movie, it's a mirror, not a lesson. You're going to look at it, and you're going to either be affected positively or negatively by what you see, and it's going to show you what you think is important in these positive or negative moments.
Okay, can I pick up on that? That's really interesting, because to me, the thing that I'm kind of really worried about as the father of a daughter is actually social media, is actually where we've gone and how we've adapted this thing, social media, and how we can't get rid of it. And even though my daughter's only 3.5, it's going to be around and there's no stopping it. And I don't know how to prepare her for it. And it's terrifying to me what social media and the worldwide internet technology has done. It's gotten away from us. The idea that she might get drunk at something and photos of her being drunk at something will be available forever. And the idea that someone might troll her. And there's a moment in the film where, you know, that guy tries to crack on to Jennifer Lawrence and she denies him twice. And by the second time, he's calling her, may I swear on your show?
Oh, of course.
Absolutely may.
Yeah, by the second time, he's calling her a fucking cunt. And when it happens in the film, you're like, and then you think about it and you're like, that's what happens all the time in chat rooms to teenage girls on social media all the time. People think that, like, oh, if you don't immediately accept me, then I can instantly call you a fucking cunt. And, you know, so for me, the film is full of the people that keep coming into her house and destroying her. They're like a phone whose notifications never stop beeping. And you might look at it and it might call you a fucking cunt. And so to me, that is the strongest reading of the film for me right now.
That's
but that
interesting.
is my mirror. Right. That is my mirror.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that, you know, for anyone, because the film is so rich, and even though he wrote it in 5 days, he rehearsed it for ages.
Yeah. For months,
he worked on it for months and months. So it actually is tight.
Yeah. And
he
that's
just
the thing.
did this 5-page blueprint, a 5-day blueprint,
Right.
but he worked on it for months.
He wrote the first draft in 5 days. That's the other thing. Like, and again, him having this narrative of him writing it in 5 days definitely fits the narrative of creation and the analogy of him being God. But like you're absolutely right. Like, this was written and then revised to shit as he rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. So it's a nice little story for the press junkets, and it fits his meta narrative of creator as God. But I don't know that it's true.
Yeah, and if you've ever read, if you've ever read books about meaning in like Coppola's films or Scorsese's films or Roman Polanski's films or David Lynch's films or Cronenberg's films, you know that there's so much in there that they've figured out over time. And so he's spoken with his costume designer and said, just do a little bit of this. And it doesn't matter if nobody gets it, but it's there.
Yeah.
And this film is full of that. It doesn't matter if you don't get it, but it is there.
Yeah, everything is a deliberate choice in this film, and it's hard to deny anything as that. I would have, CJ, for you, the thing that kind of also resonated from that I thought was interesting, and you being the father of a younger girl might have played a little more as I would have thought, is the dynamics of the relationship between Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem, where it feels and I would argue this is a fair criticism of the film. If someone didn't respond to the film, is the passivity with which Jennifer Lawrence accepts Javier Bardem's his kind of dismissal of her as a fully fleshed human beings at times. His ability to kind of cast her away for the adoration of his supposed fans, and it set up this dynamic where she is constantly giving. Now, the reason why I think this actually works is because of the final scene, which plays into this idea of art and being a creator and the people around you that love you as you try to create. I know this from and this might be too personal, but me being a filmmaker and having to make films.
You've made films?
And yeah, and then feeling like you take advantage of the people around you when you do, because you are, on this narcissistic kind of treasure hunt for yourself. So the dynamics of a heterosexual relationship in this film are quite troubling.
Yeah. Well, what he's done is he's cast God with a man.
Yeah.
And he's cast Earth with a woman, at its most simplistic, at its most basic.
Yeah.
And so that troubling dynamic is there. If he had cast Michelle Pfeiffer or Kathleen Turner in the Javier Bardem role and cast Zac Efron in the Jennifer Lawrence role, then he would have avoided that political take, wouldn't he have?
Well, it's not necessarily the heteronormativeness of it all. It's more the passivity with which she is, the way in which she basically falls into adoration mode. She doesn't question the validity of his art or the validity of himself. His art is beautiful by her accounts, and therefore when he needs, selfishly to rush off to the room to work, he casts her aside, and she accepts that, and that's kind of the nature of the relationship. Even when she's finally had enough of him, she says, "You can't even fuck me," and then they have sex and she has a baby. She kind of accepts his. It's not. She doesn't reject him. She kind of falls back into the role of mother and the wife in this relationship, which arguably has some hints of domestic abuse. It's not necessarily direct domestic abuse, but there is some elements of her.
There's definitely the seeds of it. There's definitely the mental aspect, if not the physical.
But I think
I'm just realizing that Noah. You have to watch Noah in the middle of this film.
Right.
And see where God ran off.
Yeah, so here's what it would be. It would be those assholes would be sitting on the sink and they're like, that sink's not braced yet, and then the sink breaks and the pipes go and everyone runs out. Then you pause it and you watch Noah.
No, I think you watch Noah after the Cain and Abel bit.
Well, I guess so. Maybe you have to intercut it, because I know there's parts before the flood in Noah, and then I'm sure. YouTube, go cut that together for me. And
what I actually love about all of that is the way in which God, if you read it as metaphor for God in this film, which I think is hard not to do, has no control over his followers, and the way in which followers interpret his message, whatever it may be, they interpret his work, is completely beyond his capacity to understand.
But he also don't care as long as they love him.
Yeah, he kind of continues to engage in it.
Is the narcissist God, and I love it. And it even fits what really, and obviously it's hearkening back to. I mean, if you want to bring this down to the micro level of just sort of human, heterosexual male female, or not even that, just in a power dynamic of two people in a relationship. If one is sort of like creator, another one is a giver, it can get dangerous, it can get abusive, et cetera, et cetera. But a God in this scenario, this narcissistic God who is, there's a cycle based on the beginning of the end of this movie, who is literally just doing this over and over again because he can, is acting exactly the way he would to Mother Nature, or sort of the first thing he's created to then blossom everything else out, because she's, in this case, completely disposable to him, because he can just keep doing it over and over again and get all the different kinds of adoration, understanding, misunderstanding, and it doesn't matter because he's God and he can do whatever the fuck he wants.
To me, that
narcissist God.
To me, that actually resonated most as a creator, as like someone who makes art, and the way in which you use other people for your art, and then like at the end of it when she says, "I've got nothing else to give,"
and he's like,
he harvests what he's taken from her, and he begins again. And I think for me, what I loved is the metaphor of God evolved into something more personal for me, and I think I would argue kind of fits Aronofsky as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Could I?
That's.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yep. What's your third tier?
What's your third tier?
My third tier is if you've gotten past the watching film as metaphor, if the metaphor works for you, the final tier is whether you are. I would guess that if you're into this third tier, you are probably a person who loves film. And the question here is if you're willing to accept Aronofsky's methodology for telling story. Because another, yes, we understand that he works at the level of metaphor here, but so do filmmakers like Michael Haneke, who does not bang you over the head with the metaphor, who works in a much subtler way. And so my third tier is that may prevent your enjoyment of this film is once you've gotten past all of that, even if the metaphor works for you, if you find the willingness with which Aronofsky is willing to engage in violence and in gore and in a way that feels like it's kind of poking and provoking the audience. If that doesn't work for you, if you're not the kind of person that likes Lars von Trier, for example, that might be the point at which you dislike this film.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah,
I think you've got to be able to accept that Aronofsky operates at a very loud level, at a very aggressive level.
But and I'd hope that if you get to tier 3 of your 3-tiered system, that would be a very small, finite group of people. Because, I mean, look, yes, there are moments in this film that are truly fucking terrible and disturbing. Now, are those images that I enjoy seeing? No, but they're there for a reason. And what I have a problem with is even if people have gotten to this point and then they see, for instance, the ultraviolet scene to Jennifer Lawrence.
Scene.
Well, there's two. There's two of them. There's one to the CG baby, and there's another one to
violence acted upon Jennifer Lawrence.
Lawrence, and I mean, one is, I would argue the Jennifer Lawrence one, at least personally, was far more disturbing to me than CG Baby was.
You're not a parent.
Totally. Well, you didn't see the baby actually being torn apart. I think you should have seen the baby actually being torn apart.
Just for anyone who hasn't seen this yet, basically the baby is born. It's basically an allegory for Jesus. God finally gives it to its followers to sort of see. They crowd surf it along as it pees, and then they quote accidentally break its neck, and then the next thing we see is they're eating it, basically pieces of it, ripped apart, basically symbolizing the Eucharist. Is that what the
Eucharist?
Yeah,
the body of Christ. Yeah.
So, but this time in fun, bloody Jell-O mold flavor. I get the parent analogy. I mean, as much as I can, not being one.
I'm not saying that it doesn't necessarily, but
of
for
course,
me, being a parent, seeing a baby being harmed.
But if I was to say what scene looked more real. Or what? No, let me rewind. What scene felt more real? It was that one. I was the Jennifer
I couldn't
Lawrence
agree
one.
with you more. That was the most disturbing imagery in the film to me. Is when the violence occurs to Jennifer Lawrence's body. That really literally pulled no punches, and I was actually surprised it went there, because in a way, the baby thing, we're all sort of in our heads aware that they're not really harming a baby.
Right.
And of course we know that they're not really harming, the actress who lives in Hollywood named Jennifer Lawrence, but it was shown with a certain degree of realism and effectiveness that was really quite disturbing.
And again, it plays at a level that is not subtle either. And I think this is the point of that third tier, which is that if you don't buy into the way in which Aronofsky makes films, if you don't, like from the point of view, if you're a person that doesn't like the way in which Aronofsky uses split screen in Requiem for a Dream because you think it's too on the nose, then I think the things that he does here are probably going to piss you off even more. And that might be the point at which you fall off this movie.
Yeah. I think your tiers are great. I thought your third tier, I thought it was going to go in a different direction. I thought you were going to go like, metaphor, and then the metaphor he's talking about, and then third tier, what do you think of the performances?
Right. I mean, well, to be honest with you,
Michelle Pfeiffer was pretty good. She's back.
I mean, I would, the thing is the third tier really encapsulates the delivery method of this particular production, and it can encapsulate, if you don't think the performances, if you think the performances go OTT, or if you think that the use of, I mean, you had a problem with the point of view thing, but not enough. It obviously irked you, but it's not enough to kind kind of throw you off this movie. And I think that's
I'll
where
still watch it
everything.
again.
Yeah, and in fact, the first time in this film when they do the kind of perspective thing, they do a really unusual thing that I noticed, which is that most often if you're doing a two shot between two people, there are repeated over the shoulders. So basically, if I'm shooting Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem, I shoot over Javier Bardem's shoulder, then I shoot over Jennifer Lawrence's shoulder to kind of mirror the two shots. But what they did at the beginning of this film that I actually thought was a little clumsy and I didn't enjoy it is that they would shoot Jennifer Lawrence from as a one person setup, so you wouldn't see Javier Bardem in her frame, but then they would jump over to Javier Bardem's and you would see her at the back of his frame,
right?
And it was sort of like this odd, like it's not a traditional way to kind of stitch those two scenes together, but. As we kind of talked about earlier, it's hard not to see anything in this movie because it's operating on a level that almost no other mainstream movie is doing as a deliberate choice. And so even if I don't like that per se, I can't futz with it because this is what this film is.
It's funny. Even normally the stuff that in a story that, and there's not any really stories like this I could say, but something I've talked about on this show before is I normally hate films, novels, anything about writers.
Right.
I think it's the most just sort of pretentious kind of bullshit, just like patting yourself on the back, masturbatory sort of activity. And I think a reason why I like this movie so much too, just another sort of layer of it, is basically that it does that, and then it's like, yup, this is what this is, motherfucker. Like it buys into that theory of like, yeah, creator is God, the end. And I'm like, oh well, I can't even critique them for doing that because they just basically wrote it on the blackboard right in front of me in giant block letters. And I'm like, well,
that's one of the first clues you get actually to its non-literalness is when his art is that he's a poet, because the moment that happens, you're like, oh, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
If this was real, he could be a novelist or he could be a screenwriter or he could be writing a nonfiction book. But if he's a poet, then that doesn't work.
Exactly.
That's your first clue.
You know what I actually really adored was the moment in which she reads his poetry.
Me too. Amazing shot.
Yeah,
amazing performance from her.
Amazing performance from her, but also we don't hear the poetry. We just see images of the rebirth of the planet. Yeah. And it's obviously the New Testament. And it's this amazing thing that I think works really well in this film, which is that it's this understanding that obviously it's a visual medium, and if we had Jennifer Lawrence read out some poem about the earth,
that would have sucked.
even if it was as fine as Pablo Neruda's finest poem, it would probably be terrible. And this is there's a Korean film, Poetry by Lee Chang-dong, which has this basic moment in it where we hear poetry for the first time. We hear a poem that's been talked about for the entire film. And when I heard it, and I'm not a person who loves poetry, when I heard it, I fell in love with poetry. And I think what was amazing and lovely about this particular scene is it translates poetry into a medium that works for what this film is actually operating on. And it was just, it's for all the cries of Aronofsky being unsubtle and perhaps hitting you over the head with metaphor and symbolism, I think that is a lovely moment of restraint and an example of, again, how deliberate this film was, even as a provocation.
Can I just flip the point of view for a second?
Sure.
Cinema Score F, Shahir Dowd's Facebook feed, people saying how awful they thought the film was. Go over to, Rotten Tomatoes and notice that critics around the world have given this film at least a 70 fresh. There are a lot of critics who love it. It's going to be in a lot of critics' top 10 lists, certainly going to be in mine. I think it's going to be number 2 for me right now. Yeah. It's, let's not look at this as a bad film. Let's look at this as a fantastic film that is essentially universally celebrated. And it just, the people who speak the loudest in the first few seconds after something happens are the naysayers. But why don't we look at this film as actually something that's universally regarded as really good?
Well, the only thing I would say about that has been concerning me of late is that there is a growing disconnect between what critics love and what audiences love. And I talked about this a little bit in our It episode, where I kind of feel like there was a growing, I felt like a disconnect between the fact that people seemed to be around me, seemed to be enjoying this movie, but I didn't think it was a good movie. And I think the troublesome part about this disconnect is that I'm not sure at which point the twain shall meet. And
Infinity War.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll see about that. But perhaps, maybe you're right. Maybe Infinity War will turn the whole thing around for me. But I do sort of, I worry about, yes, I agree that there are critics loving this film, but audiences don't seem to be responding to it. And audiences aren't responding to it with dollars. And audiences matter, critics matter in terms of the end of the year when a film can be, nominated for awards and bring acclaim and prestige to
But don't they only matter just to get audience there?
Well, they can help to get audiences there, but if audiences don't turn up, that's possibly more damning than if a film is widely loved.
I think this film is going to get nominated for multiple Oscars.
I think it's been released in just the wrong period of time to do that.
I think it'll be nominated. I don't think it'll win much of anything.
I think it'll be nominated for production design, cinematography, Michelle Pfeiffer. Possibly best director.
I would have totally agreed with you if it had been released in December.
Right.
I think it's been released this early, perhaps because there was a feeling that the provocation might be too heavy. But I also think the film would have actually played better in December.
Right.
Merry Christmas.
I think it would have played better in the award season. Yeah. There's Jesus on the cross.
Movie. You're right. It's a religious movie.
It's the best Christmas movie of the year.
It may have been fear
They should have released it on Christmas Day.
Oh.
God, that would have been amazing.
It would have been so good.
I think there might have just been a fear of provoking too much at that point. I don't know. Look, I'm speculating entirely on the marketing. My feeling is, yes, this is at this point one of my favorite films of the year, without a doubt. And this is wrapping up into my
Go your final thoughts. Let's do it.
This is definitely one of my favorite films of the year. I am so excited by this movie. I'm excited not just by what this movie is, but by the fact that this movie exists and that it is working at a palette that we on a canvas that we don't often see in mainstream films, and with big stars. And who would have thought Andrei Zalowski, the director of Possession, would who's no longer with us, but a film that would have sat right alongside his film Possession would be in mainstream theaters right now and provoking conversation with mainstream moviegoers. And that to me is again a miraculous thing, but on a purely metaphorical story resonant level, this film also functions so well in its take on the biblical story, and its take on religion, its take on art as creation. It is a much more profound piece of storytelling than Noah is, and I just adore this film. And I think I apologize to Annie. She's sort of been set up as the straw man in this argument here. In terms of her response to the film, if you don't like this film, I can totally see your point of view. I can totally see how this film can just put you off if this is not what you're into. If you're not tense by this movie in the way that you were in It, I can understand that. But I think this movie, just as a comparison point against it, has a lot more to offer the world. It does what cinema should do, and it does what I want out of movies. And that is not necessarily what I enjoy and what I like, but it's what I feel feeds my soul, both as a film goer and as a filmmaker.
All right. That was passionate. I guess I'll go so then CJ can have the last word. Look, I mean, you're looking at a film that you go into it and you're thinking it is a story about kind of a horror movie where there's a kind of maybe abusive husband and the wife's kind of trapped in a house, and you get the Christian explanation of how the planet Earth was created and then destroyed. And you're like, what? Like, I was not expecting it. I love the God as egomaniac. And again, I go back to the question, how could God not be? It's like, you only love that I love you. That's what Jennifer Lawrence is basically saying to Javier Bardem in this film. Like, that's it. It's this egomania. I just love the ego thing. What else? Oh, I loved all of the little extra symbolism. Obviously, the age differential is sort of an excuse if you want to read it in a way that, well, that's the earth when it was young. The crystal breaking represents the apple from the Garden of Eden. The sink in the pipes obviously is the world not supporting the weight or the evil that was put upon it, therefore the flood. The bloody hole in the floor is kind of representative of the first murder, because that's basically what happened. The yellow powder I still think is the sun. Oh my God. And the "is it hot in here or is it just me" Harold line from Kristen Wiig, which by the way was written by Aronofsky's son.
Oh, really?
That line was written by his son, and he's like, that's genius. That's great. I guess this movie to me, I agree with Shahir's sort of sentiment. I think the world would be a better place if all the people that watch this movie actually really just got beyond its visceral, like that sort of, because there's moments of horror in this film that any human being should be like, that is terrifying and awful. But if you just took the time to actually see what was, pay attention to the man behind the curtain in this sort of scenario, and pay attention to the multitude of metaphor that you can sort of glean from this film. Hell, I mean, even the rebirth aspect. I want to see it. I don't think this is true, but wouldn't it be amazing if that first image of the woman's face we see was Rachel Weisz?
It kind of looked like
It looked like her, and that's so egotistical, like Aronofsky would do, and that God would do, and it's so fucking cylindrical and perfect. I just really think if you didn't like this film, watch it again, and watch it without the I don't like this film. Watch it from a sense of all of these different angles you can take it from, and yeah, I'm buying this thing. This thing is great.
You're drinking the Kool-Aid?
Yeah, I'm drinking that yellow sun powder. Fucking hook me up, CJ. Take us home.
Well, everything that Shahir said, everything that you just said, Matt, I agree with entirely. This is among my 3 favorite films of the year thus far. The other 2 are Raw and Personal Shopper. And all 3 of them are metaphorical films that are horror adjacent. So, I think that's really a thing this year. I mean, there's also films like Get Out that are horror adjacent. It Comes at Night that are metaphorical and horror adjacent, that have a lot more to say, but are also sort of playing with genre. I love that it exists. One of the other big things that I got out of it, like as an instant read, like straight away, like the first thing I thought of was that whether it is, God and Jesus, or whether it is modern stupid celebrities for the sake of being celebrities, whether they've been on reality shows or whether they've got big lips or whatever, or serious artists who are also highly acclaimed, worship of them is all cult-like, whether it's Jesus or whether it's Pablo Neruda or whether it's the Kardashians, it's all a cult.
Yep.
So worship of singular human beings is all a cult. And I think that's a really interesting thing the film is playing with. And also just as a technical film, I think it's incredible. I think the performances are amazing considering that they're all playing metaphors. I think Ed Harris is phenomenal. I think Javier Bardem's casting is just perfect, hyper masculine, middle-aged, physically strong, but also these beautiful tender eyes, all the contradictions inherent in being Javier Bardem are right for the character. And like Birdman, it is a visceral thrill. Yeah. It is a non-stop visceral thrill ride of a movie. Metaphor aside, it's propulsively exciting as a piece of handheld cinema.
I couldn't agree more with you. And I mean, look, now the 3 of us might be called pretentious for loving this movie. We might have fallen
Bring it on. I wear it proudly.
Yeah, but I wear it proudly, and I will defend this film to the death.
And I dare someone to call me fucking pretentious. Look at my fucking favorite movies. No. There's literally no pretension in this. This is this is literally filmmaking at one of its highest levels. And I can't even believe I'm saying this because I hate stories about writers. I hate them. And this movie is wonderful. No, there's zero I know when I can be pretentious, to be fully honest, and this is not one of those times.
And he's really set the bar for like auteurist final cut cinema released by a major studio.
Yeah.
You know, someone's going to have to really
by
try hard to
also
top
kind
this.
of cutting himself down at the knees, showing his true colors about what he thinks of this. Like, it's this weird, everything is a fucking circle in this movie.
I mean, I don't think it paints a very positive portrait of him.
No, it does not. And I hope he knows that, because if he did, it's ballsy and it's honest.
I would advise his 10-year-old son not to see this film for a while.
Yeah.
But you know what I would have loved is like the studio I would have loved to have seen the studio notes on this movie.
Oh my God.
And I would have loved to have seen like the executive editor, you know, the executive who comes in with their own editor who tries to like chop this movie up. And it's one of those movies that's such a demonstration of a personal vision that there's no way to chop this up that makes it better in any way. Like, even if you can, you know, even if trimming it down makes it shorter and sharper, it's not the film that was intended.
The first note would be to read the poem. First note would be to read the poem.
Do you think we can see the poem?
Do you think we can see the poem? And is it going to be an iambic pentameter?
Could we get Morgan Freeman to read the poem?
Oh, yeah.
for us?
Morgan Freeman would be great. Here, I know his agent. Let's get him on the phone. And that would be how this movie crumbles. Wow. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you so much for this discussion. This has been the only podcast about the film Mother. CJ, when you are not helping us blow minds and see new meanings inside of wonderful film, where can folks find you?
Please watch my web TV show, Watch This. You can find it at Skippy TV. That's SKIPI.TV. Subscribe to my free podcast, Movieland, all one word. That's through the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, ABC. And also read my reviews at filmmafia.com.au. AU is for Australia. Film Mafia, all one word.
Fantastic. Big fans of your work,
Yes.
CJ. Thank you so much for coming along and helping us with this discussion.
This is such a great film to talk about. I've loved it.
Yeah.
Matt, how about yourself? Where can we find you when you are not accusing our one true overlord as a narcissist?
Oh, he knows it and he loves it. You can find me singing that narcissist, well, not praises, just knowing he exists, kind of. Does he? I don't know what I'm even saying anymore. MatthewKroll.com is where you can find my existential ramblings. Also, you can find me at Skeletor, the number 4, PREZ on Instagram, and Emperor MSK on Twitter. You know, that Twitter handle isn't narcissistic. I don't know what you're talking about. Shahir, where are you?
Where am I? You can find all of my work at shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD. Please write us in with your thoughts on Mother, whether you passed the 3 tiers or not of this film, and tell us where you fell off and why you fell off. We'd love to hear counter opinions, as we know many of them exist.
Tell us why we're wrong. Tell us. Come at us, bro.
Don't come at us. I want to hear.
No, come. I'm ready for a fight.
I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you.
Oh, I'm not mad at you.
Yeah.
I love you because you love us. Much like egotistical God.
Everybody, we'll see you next week.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.